The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Are NDEs intended to expand our consciousness? And if so, what are we supposed to do about it? Are we meant to hold onto our NDE like a precious secret or share it with the world? Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. To summarize the approach, today's guest is taking to her NDE. The title of her talk at the upcoming IANS conference in San Antonio is billed as "Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, now what?" And now what should be the question every NDEer asks after such a life-changing experience. For Deirdre DeWitt Maltby, her NDE meant a new perspective, a new journey, and a new life. Her accident, a 12-day coma, NDE, and several spiritually transformative experiences were to become the catalyst for changing Deirdre's life. Upon leaving the physical body, she was given a glimpse beyond our known reality, realized she was in the presence of her Maker, and was given a most valuable and cherished gift to take with her for the rest of her life. Now, Deirdre shares the lessons learned from the other side. They were meant for everyone, and so she's written a book about it titled "While I Was Out," describing the dynamic spirit within that connects us all with the invisible wiring of universal love. And Dee insists one does not have to have a near-death experience to go where she did. It's available to all of us when hearts are open to what is out there waiting. Dee, welcome to NDE Radio.
Oh, hi, Lee. Thank you. I'm really honored that you asked me to be here, and I'm really excited, too, because I don't know that we can do this all in a half an hour.
Well, probably not. Listeners always want to know a little something about your NDE, so why don't we start with that?
Well, I was 56 years old, and quite honestly, I'd been through a lot of typical spiritual journeys in my life. I think I had a lot of religious hang-ups, but that was based on several things that I went through, very traumatic things that I went through early on in my life. So by the time I got to middle age, I had pretty much shut everything away. I'd come to terms with the way my life was, and I was okay with that. But anything spiritual, anything really God-oriented or beyond our physical lives, I think I kind of put that on a shelf somewhere, and I figured I'd deal with that when I got there, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And on the middle of an ordinary day, just like we all have, you go to work or you go shopping or you come home. I had an accident, and through that accident, my life changed forever. I didn't look into a lot of NDEs afterwards because what had happened to me was so life-changing and so profoundly mine. I really figured that I had to process it myself. But I felt that I went through 4 different experiences within about 4 weeks. And part of them were the NDE. Part of them was to show me that there really was something beyond this reality. Also an understanding that there truly is whatever you want to call a creator, a God, a maker, a source of us all. And beyond that, and with that, comes this beautiful thing called self-love. And then at the very end of all of that is earthly confirmation, and then ultimately a choice. And that's one of the other greatest gifts we've been given, besides the gift of life, is the gift of choice.
Now, you mentioned having caught a glimpse of our Maker. Do you see a source of love outside of yourself as well as the source within yourself?
Well, can I read you a little bit from? I think I said it best when I finally got it all out and I was able to put it down into words and put it into my book. And then after, I played over and over and over again like an endless tape. And and it finally pushed itself out, and I think it kind of does that to a lot of us NDEers.
Sure.
And then once that happens, you look forward. You don't look backwards. You go forward with what you have. So let me just read you this little thing. I went over this again this morning, and I said, wow, this really kind of says the way it was for me.
Great.
The experience I had has now transformed my whole being. It's rewired my soul. I'm the same me, only the direction manual for running me seems to have changed. It is like a computer that has been reprogrammed and then rebooted somehow. And I'm still exploring this new way of being, of getting used to this new way of being alive, this new way of perceiving this world around me, and somehow a new way of knowing. One of the things that became very clear to me is that I must find and I must grow close to this force that we label as God on my very own. Other people can only offer insights and directions in which and where to look, but it is I alone who must find the answers within my own soul. In the time since my accident, I have been discovering that God, Creator, is already within my heart, and it's waiting. It's just waiting for me to find Him. And that pretty much sums up how every day of my life is now. It's like my near-death experience was the springboard for who I am now.
Do you see your NDE as an internal experience or an external experience?
Both.
Or perhaps both?
Absolutely both. Absolutely both. It gets to the point in your life where the two are communicating with one another. I guess you can say there's a here and there's a there, but I think what some of us experience with these NDEs, and I don't know, again, I can only speak for myself, but I find that the more that I lean into what I experienced by feeling that I was literally held in the palm of the hand of the essence that created me, when I bring that back into this world, it's part of my world. I can't separate the two. And so every day of my life that I go forward, I try to integrate that space, if you will, that space between this world and the next, because we live here. And for me, the four most important words that truly did change my life is that we truly are spirit. And I understood that, and I knew that, and it's kind of once you know something, you can't take that knowing away from yourself. And if you use it to grow from, then every single day becomes richer, it becomes more beautiful. You still stumble and fall, but that's what all this is about. So pardon?
I was going to say, how soon after your experience did you decide to write the book, and how long did it take you to write?
It was like in the hospital room, I couldn't talk, and I was very weak. I kept trying to communicate to my sister, and she knew I was frantic about something, and she kept going, what's the matter, what's the matter? And I was only strong enough to write the word God on my notepad. And she knew that something really profound had happened to me. And when I could, I would tell her. And the whole thing just pushed its way out immediately. I don't know if, my life was just ready for it. I don't know if my soul was ready for it. But I remember that about a week after my incident, I was trying to get from the living room to my bedroom to get to the computer, and I could still barely walk. And this wasn't a week after my incident, but it was a week after I got home from the hospital. And no one was at home with me. And I remember I had my arm on the ironing board to steady myself. And all of a sudden, before I could even take the next step, it was like nobody talked to me, but it was whatever it was telling me without the words. It was like, you know what? everything, all these steps, all these earthly confirmations, this near-death experience that you've had, the in and out of crossing between this world and the next over the, these past weeks, you can either accept it, and if you do, your life is going to change forever. Everything about your life is going to change. But you don't have to. You don't have to do that. And if you don't, your life will just go back the way it was, and that's fine too. It's like I knew that I would be loved in either decision that I made. And before I could even make that next step, my heart had already made the decision. And I know that I hear that other NDEers sometimes get that within their experience, but this was something that happened to me in real time. I was very much awake, I was conscious, and I was just trying to get from one room to the next. And you know what? I still have the same life, I still have the same friends, I still do the same things. But whatever that was that told me that, it was absolutely right, because everything in my life has changed.
How did your friends and family take your story?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to count how many times my husband was on the phone trying to find out what was wrong with me. I think for the most part, because I have such conviction about this, that they either think I'm totally nuts and walk away and just have a smile on their face because they've had a great conversation, or they know, gosh, we know Deirdre. We think she means what she says. So actually it's been very positive. It's been extremely positive. I live in a very, very small mountain town, and we're very isolated, so to speak. So my first desire, once this endless tape kept playing over and over and over in my head, and I knew the only way to get it out was to put it down on paper. And so I really didn't write this book to become an author. I wrote this book to thank my family, to thank my friends, to thank my community for their loving support for my family when I was so close to dying. And I wanted them to know what I went through. I wanted them to be there with me. And so this was how I did it. And it's just been ongoing ever since. I know that I got very, very, where you want to go running down the street and you want to start beating on doors and going, wake up, wake up, wake up. Either like Revere or Chicken Little, like, it's real. And I was bursting at the seams. I was just bursting at the seams. And I think there were other plans in store for me, because I got cut off pretty quickly. I still had lessons to learn. I still had processing to do. And even though my experience was only 6 years ago, every day of my life has been devoted towards processing and learning and growing from that experience. I realized very quickly I couldn't get hung up in the details of it. I had to hang on to the message.
Have you ever seen the Matrix movies? An awful lot of people don't want to take the pill that awakens them, the red pill or the blue pill. A lot of them are quite content to stay just as they are. So when you're banging on doors like that, you don't always get a happy response.
No, you don't. And one of the biggest things that I've learned, because a couple of years after my experience, I got to tell you, Lee, my life fell apart. I almost lost every single thing I had. My business, my relationship with my sister, my husband, my finances, everything. Hang on. And when I got to the bottom of it all, it was like this tiny little life preserver in my soul. It was like, didn't lose anything. And I hung on to this little tiny seed of gratitude. And if I could just even look out the window and see a white cloud and be grateful for that cloud, it was like, okay, I can do that. I can still see that. I can be grateful for that. And from that, every little thing in my life grew, and it grew out of gratitude. And before I knew it, and where I stand now, my life is richer than it's ever been in all my days. But
so
it's
even,
not easy. I've fallen flat on my face many times.
Yeah, even with that loss, well, let me give you a suppose. Suppose you'd not had that NDE and that experience to strengthen you, and you'd gone through, the various failures you were just referring to. Would you have come out the same way, do you think, or was the NDE like a life preserver for you?
It was, but it's also brought me to the point where I realized that I'm going to have other catastrophes in my life. I'm going to have other pitfalls, or, I kind of see things like waves. You can ride the crest, but sooner or later you're going to go back into the trough. But knowing that it's okay, I've taken the NDE experience and I've brought it into my life so that my life can grow. And once it started growing like that, I realized, you know what? I'm not learning anything. I mean, it's not like my NDE gave me something that nobody else can have. It's there for all of us. And I think that's what's got me so hyped up, is that when we open our hearts and when we get to the true desire of wanting to know ourselves and know that there's something outside of ourselves, that's when everything explodes. And life becomes like a near-death experience. It opens us to what we are.
How do you tell a generation of people who've never gone to church, who don't necessarily have any spiritual background, that there is a whole other world out there?
Well, I'm actually having that circumstance in my life right now. That's within my family unit right now. And the only thing that I can truly do is live my life as I am driven from within, as this force that created me lives inside of me and rights my ship. And all I can do is hopefully be an example by how I live my life, how I use my words, how I use my energy, how I use my gratefulness. And maybe through that, the people that know me, especially the people that knew me before, was like, wow, maybe there is something there, and maybe I need to look inside my own self a little bit. You can drag a horse to water, but, like they say, you can't make them drink.
Exactly.
And definitely, what is it? Before enlightenment, you chop wood, you carry water. Well, not to say that I've been enlightened, but when you do get a glimpse of something greater, when you do understand something greater, you're put right back where you were. You still have all the daily problems. You still have all the issues. So you got to chop wood and you still got to carry water, but you do it in a different way, and it means something different, because now when you're chopping wood or you're having that daily experience, you're right there. Your soul is right there, and you're going, you know what? I know what it's like to know now that I could die in the next second. Out of the clear blue, the roof could fall in on us, I mean, you see it time and time again where people are living their lives and next second they're gone. So I've become so cognizant now, and I catch myself living on automatic, and every now and then, especially during the day. And I will have to say, it goes back to the NDE. I get this little tap on my shoulder. I get this little tap in my soul. It's like, Deirdre, come back to right now. Live your life right now, because this is what's important. So maybe by doing that, if other people see that, maybe they'll just know. I don't know.
Now you're giving a talk at the IANS conference in September, and probably half your audience will have had NDEs, and the other half may just be curious about them. So how do you deal with an audience like that? What are you going to say?
Well, actually, I almost felt like when I first went to the IANS conference in Denver, I remember saying to myself, what am I doing here? Everybody else has had a near-death experience. It's kind of like, preaching to the choir kind of thing, if you're all sitting around talking or doing whatever. And I did go again in 2012 down to Phoenix, and I was on the experiencer panel down there, so I got, to do a little 15-minute talk. But I got to tell you, just exchanging lessons, details, the openness, the learning. And I've met so many people through my book that have never had a near-death experience. In fact, it's those people that usually email me or call me or talk to me, on Facebook. And they're like, wow, I've had these kind of feelings because I went very deeply into my book about what happened to me afterwards. In fact, the last half of my book is basically my words and my journals and my thoughts as to when I was growing and absorbing, what I had learned.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want to give the people that have never had a near-death experience. And it's not, we didn't learn anything that nobody else knows. I think we were just tapped on the shoulder a little bit and reminded. And I think we're supposed to remind other people, too. But sure, you get those people that say, well, gee, do I have to roll a Tahoe like you did to figure out, all this? And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. A group of girls came into my store last week, and we all went for coffee, and we sat down. They actually drove from Indiana, and were out here on vacation, and they looked me up. And we had the most absolutely uplifting, phenomenal conversation. And I know they walked away with something to take with them. Now, whether they do something with it or not, I'm not responsible for that. All I can do is share what I have. So,
have you noticed that when you do tell your story to people who have not had an NDE, somewhere their memory is jogged into remembering another story they've heard or a family member who experienced some personal mystical happening in their lives, and then you get stories back.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it just becomes a circle of sharing. And through that sharing comes a circle of growing. And we each take something away with us. Something to ponder, something to add to the storehouse of what we can use to grow with. And, that's why I labeled my little talk, Been There, Done That, Got the T-shirt, because I thought, well, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a researcher. I haven't researched near-death experiences. Heck, I haven't even read about a whole lot of them, And I just wanted people to know that I'm another Joe Schmo, and I just went through something that was so profound that I got to share it, And I'm that person. I'm talking to me before my accident. That's who I talk to. I talk to the person that I was, the person that had put themselves on hold and thought, well, I'll deal with all that later because I don't know how I feel about it. That's the person I talk to. And it's so enriching. It's so fabulous. And I don't know. I work in a store. I work in retail, and every single day people come in my door. I don't see them the way I used to see them. And sometimes even people I've only met for a minute or so. I don't try to push anything on anybody. I just try to be there in the moment with that person. And then before I know it, all of a sudden, we are talking about the most fabulous thing. And we both walk away from the experience going, wow, got something today. This is pretty cool. So that's
now you're living in a small town in Colorado.
I am.
Colorado recently legalized recreational use of marijuana. Do you suppose there is a heightened sense of exploratory curiosity in your state where people are perhaps more interested in finding out something more about themselves and relationships with other people, and that's what encouraged them to legalize this drug? Or what's your attitude toward all of that?
Boy, I don't know, but I think my first comment was, well, why the heck didn't they do this when I was 20? But I'm so far past that now as far as, what something like that would mean in my life. And quite honestly, I truly, it hasn't touched my life here all that much, even though we do have, in this very, very small little town, we have 5, marijuana centers here where you can go for recreational use.
Wow, 5 of them in a tiny town?
Yeah, there's only 5,000 people in my town.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so, but,
I've always assumed, having been a child of the 60s myself, that people especially got into hallucinogenics because they were searching for something meaningful, spiritually meaningful in their lives. It wasn't just for entertainment purposes, but it's not. It's very limited compared to a real NDE, for example.
Oh, absolutely. And yes, being a child of the 60s, I was very much into the same thing, and I can tell you my near-death experience put all of that to shame. If you could bottle a near-death experience, and I think everybody that's ever had one, if you could bottle it and sell it, you probably could make a fortune, because yes, it far outshines any hallucinogenic you could ever hope to experience. But yet, they're not hallucinations. It's a realness far beyond the fabric of even this reality.
Absolutely. Dee, we're running out of time here, and I want you to be able to tell the listeners how they might get in touch with you. You mentioned Facebook. How can they order your book? Give us a little of that information.
Well, my book has only been self-printed, and I'm very grateful to say that I've printed several thousand copies at this point that have gone out to around the world. It is on Amazon, but you can. My website is DeirdreMaltby.com, and it's DeirdreMaltby.com, and you can click on the link there, and it will take you to a couple of places that you can order the book. Or my book, my Facebook page for my book is called While I Was Out. I'm getting ready to come out with another great little book that I'm really excited to share with people, because they're not my words. About a year after my near-death experience, I started writing, and it's something I had never done before in my life. But that's a whole nother story and a whole nother chapter. But I am coming out with a little book, and I will be taking it to IANS with me. And this book is for you. That's the title of it. And it's the Little Book of Whispers. It's the whispers that I've been getting over the last 5 years, and I truly feel that they're meant to be shared with other people. And I'm so happy that you invited me here, Lee, and I hope I totally didn't talk your ear off. But
not at all. I look forward to seeing you out in San Antonio when we're both out there.
You.
Yeah. Sadly, we're out of time for today. My thanks to Deirdre DeWitt Maltby for this instructive show. Be sure to look for her book, While I Was Out, and come hear her discussion at the upcoming IANS conference in San Antonio at September 3rd through 6th. And for details, you can go to iands.org. If you'd like to listen to this show again or any other of our previous programs, please visit our website at nderadio.org. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.